Declassified. I'm Nathaniel Shepard, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. In this series, we reveal real Cold War secrets and excavate the classified details your government hoped you'd never discover. And here we go. Operation Midnight Climax, when the CIA ran brothels for science. The government program that turned tax dollars into sex, drugs, and two-way mirrors. On a late night in San Francisco's Telegraph Hill, 1957, and behind a two-way mirror in an apartment decorated with velvet curtains and Toulouse-Lautrec posters, a portly man sat on a portable toilet, nursing his seventh martini of the night. He was watching a businessman from Oakland discover that reality had become negotiable. The businessman thought he was having a clandestine encounter with a woman. He didn't know she was on the federal payroll. He didn't know his drink had been dosed with LSD. He definitely didn't know that the fat man behind the mirror was a federal narcotics agent named George Hunter White, taking notes for the Central Intelligence Agency. Your tax dollars at work. This was Operation Midnight Climax, a program so perfectly depraved that it sounds like something from a bureaucrat's acid trip. Except it was real. The CIA ran brothels in San Francisco and New York, where prostitutes fed LSD to unwitting Johns, while government agents watched through two-way mirrors, scribbling observations about how Americans behaved when their minds came apart. They did this for over a decade, with a budget and expense reports and office parties. Welcome to the moment when your government became your pimp. The beautiful sleaze of the program. Operation Midnight Climax wasn't born from strategic necessity. It was born from the realization that if you wanted to study how LSD affected unwitting subjects, you needed subjects who couldn't complain to authorities. Who better than men visiting prostitutes? The logic was gorgeously cynical. These men couldn't go to the police without admitting they'd been seeking illegal services. They couldn't explain their symptoms to their wives without destroying their marriages. They were the perfect victims, compromised before the experiment even began. The program emerged from MKUltra's twisted family tree as subproject 42. While Sidney Gottlieb's chemists were dosing each other at Langley, George White was building something more ambitious, an operational laboratory where the test subjects came to you. The architect of debauchery. George Hunter White was the perfect man for this perfectly awful job. A Bureau of Narcotics agent who'd spent decades in the underground. White looked like a corrupt sheriff from a B-movie, 250 pounds, perpetually sweating, with a face that suggested both violence and appetite. His qualifications for running CIA brothels included deep connections in the criminal underworld, complete absence of moral constraints, functional alcoholism that allowed him to drink while working, an apartment in San Francisco he was willing to convert, what his own diary called a zest for life's pleasures. White wasn't just willing to run a government brothel, he was enthusiastic about it. In a letter declassified decades later, he wrote, "I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" That's not paraphrased. That's what he actually wrote. The architecture of official depravity. The main safehouse operated at 225 Chestnut Street in Telegraph Hill, now some of San Francisco's most expensive real estate. White transformed it into what CIA documents called an observation post. but what was actually a taxpayer-funded sex dungeon with surveillance equipment. The setup included two-way mirrors installed by CIA technicians, recording equipment hidden throughout, a bar stocked with bourbon, gin, and LSD, velvet curtains and French posters for atmosphere, a portable toilet behind the mirror for extended observation sessions. The prostitutes, referred to in CIA documents as undercover operatives, were recruited from the streets of the Tenderloin, the hardcore vice district, and North Beach, the naughty but nice bohemian quarter. White trained them in dosing techniques. Payment was usually $100 for an evening's work, about $1,000 today, and they were given get-out-of-jail-free cards for any arrests. The Johns were selected based on specific criteria. Out-of-towners were preferred, married men were ideal, and anyone who seemed too stable was rejected. The goal was subjects who were already keeping secrets. A night at the office. Here's how a typical evening at Midnight Climax operated, based on declassified documents and Senate testimony. 6 p.m. White arrives, sets up recording equipment, begins drinking from what colleagues described as an ever-present pitcher of martinis. 7 p.m. The operative prostitute arrives, briefs White on the evening's potential subjects. 8 p.m. Clients begin arriving at the safehouse, believing it's a discreet apartment for liaisons. 8:30 p.m. The operative doses the client's drink with LSD, anywhere from 100 to 300 micrograms, massive doses by any standard. 9 p.m. White positions himself behind the mirror, sitting on his portable toilet, the only seat that fit in the observation space, taking notes as the drug takes effect. 9:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. The subject's reality dissolves. White documents reactions, paranoia, euphoria, confusion, terror. Some subjects believed they were dying. Some experienced religious visions. Some tried to escape. 2 a.m. If the subject was still too impaired to leave, the operative would call a cab, sometimes accompanying them to ensure they got home safely. 3 a.m. White compiles his notes, finishes the remaining martinis, secures the safe house. This happened 3 to 4 nights a week for several years. The body count. Unlike MKUltra's more clinical experiments, Midnight Climax left a trail of victims with names and faces. Wayne Ritchie, 1957, a deputy U.S. Marshal who claimed he was dosed at a Christmas party, not a brothel. He reported holding up a bar at gunpoint while under the influence, with no memory of why. Charges were dropped when he threatened to expose the program. The Unknown Executive, 1958, reported but unverified as a businessman from the peninsula. This victim jumped from a hotel window, believing he could fly, survived with multiple fractures. The incident was covered up as an attempted suicide. Multiple psychiatric admissions. Hospital records from the period show a spike in acute psychotic episodes among middle-aged men in the Telegraph Hill area. Most were diagnosed as brief reactive psychosis and released. The real number of victims remains unknown. White's own records, seized after his death, suggested hundreds of subjects across the program's lifetime. The CIA maintains most were successfully dosed without significant incident, which is bureaucraties, for they survived. The expense reports from hell. Perhaps nothing captures the banality of evil better than George White's expense reports, declassified in the 1970s, that included such typical expenses as liquor for operatives, $243.50. Rental of observational equipment, $150. Sundries for maintaining cover, $84. Translation, prostitute costumes. Replacement of damaged furniture, $317. Taxi fares for confused subjects, $44.50. These reports, filed monthly, show the routine nature of the operation. Multiply these figures by several years, multiple safe houses, and adjust for inflation. Taxpayers funded millions in what was essentially a government drug and sex dungeon. One report defending budget overruns noted, "The unique nature of this operation requires flexibility in accounting procedures." That's government speak for, "We can't exactly file receipts for LSD and hookers." The competition circuit. Midnight Climax wasn't operating in isolation. It was part of a larger competition within the intelligence community to perfect mind control and interrogation techniques. The program competed with Artichoke, using conventional torture and drugs; Bluebird, hypnosis and psychological manipulation; MKUltra, mainline, clinical experiments in hospitals, military programs, testing on soldiers at Edgewood Arsenal. Each program jealously guarded its successes while racing to achieve the ultimate goal: complete control of human behavior. Midnight Climax contribution was proving that LSD could be operationally deployed in realistic social settings. The safehouse expansion. By 1958, the San Francisco operation was deemed successful enough to expand. Additional safe houses opened in Marin County, targeting wealthy suburbanites; New York City, 2 apartments in Greenwich Village; Los Angeles, brief operation closed after local law enforcement became suspicious. Each location was fitted with the same setup: 2-way mirrors, recording equipment, and a bar stocked with every conceivable mixture of alcohol and hallucinogens. The New York operation was run by Charles Siragusa, who lacked White's enthusiasm for the work. His reports, considerably more clinical, noted, "Subjects exhibit predictable deterioration of judgment and increase in suggestibility. Operational value remains questionable." When the party ended, Operation Midnight Climax officially ended in 1965, though some researchers believe it continued under different names into the 1970s. The closure came not from moral awakening, but from practical concerns. The Haight-Ashbury hippie movement made LSD widely available. The CIA no longer had a monopoly. Several near misses with exposure, including a San Francisco Chronicle reporter getting suspicious. George White's retirement in 1965. He died in 1975, taking many secrets to his grave. And growing concern about potential Soviet knowledge of the program. The safe houses were sanitized and sold. The furniture was auctioned. The 2-way mirrors were removed and destroyed. But the memories and the damage remained. The Senate finally asks questions. In 1975, the Church Committee hauled CIA officials before Congress to explain Midnight Climax. The testimony reads like absurdist theater. Senator Kennedy: "Did the CIA operate houses of prostitution?" CIA official: "We maintained observational posts that utilized various covers." Kennedy: "That's a yes." Official: "The nature of the operation required realistic settings." The CIA's defense was essentially, "We needed to see how real Americans reacted to LSD in real situations. What's more real than visiting a prostitute. Sidney Gottlieb, MKUltra's mastermind, defended Midnight Climax as essential research that provided valuable operational insights. When pressed on what insights justified drugging unwitting citizens, he cited improved interrogation techniques and understanding of Soviet methods. The modern echoes. The safehouse at 225 Chestnut Street is now a multi-million-dollar property with views of the bay. There's no plaque, no memorial to the men whose minds were broken there for science, but Midnight Climax's legacy persists. Interrogation techniques developed here appeared in CIA black sites. The legal framework claiming national security trumps consent remains. Some victims are still alive, still uncompensated, still unacknowledged. In 2020, Wayne Ritchie, one of the few confirmed survivors, said in an interview, "They stole a piece of my mind that night. I've spent 60 years trying to get it back." The verdict. Operation Midnight Climax represents the moment the American intelligence community achieved perfect depravity, turning the intimate vulnerabilities of its own citizens into a weapon against them. This wasn't abstract policy or distant warfare. This was the United States government running brothels where it drugged its own citizens to watch them psychologically disintegrate. They took notes, they filed reports, they requested budget increases. The men behind the mirrors weren't sadists. That would almost be more comprehensible. They were bureaucrats, following orders, filling out forms, building better ways to break human minds. George White drank his martinis and watched men's sanity dissolve, not because he was evil, but because it was his job. That's the true horror of Midnight Climax. It normalized depravity, bureaucratized violation, and turned the most intimate human moments into data points for operational improvement. Somewhere in the CIA archives, there are still classified files about what they learned from watching drugged men in brothels. The techniques developed in those San Francisco safehouses informed decades of enhanced interrogation. The legal justifications crafted for Midnight Climax created precedents that echo in today's surveillance programs. But perhaps the most lasting legacy is the proof it provides. Given sufficient classification, funding, and institutional momentum, the American government will do absolutely anything to its own citizens. They'll even make you pay for your own observation. And there it is, another documented descent into the declassified, filed properly, stamped accordingly, and revealed at last. I'm Nathaniel Shepard, your host on behalf of author Daniel P. Douglas. Be sure to check out Daniel's Substack, The Intelligence Bulletin from author Daniel P. Douglas, for other podcast series, written articles, and links to all of his books. Thank you for listening.